Hello there, friends! Rebecca here, the Dragon Librarian from Farmington Community Library, and Zephyr and I are here today to talk to you about a book that we are still chuckling over, and it's one that we really enjoyed, and we hope that you will enjoy it too. Now, this is actually the second book in a trilogy that came out not too long ago. The first book I actually talked about already. You may or may not remember back in February when we were talking about romance books. There was a particular book that I talked about that I hyped it up quite a bit. And the second book in the trilogy just recently came out, and I'm very excited about it, and even more excited to share it with you today. So the book that I'm talking about is Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver, and this is the second book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. Now, just to, poke your memory a little bit, this was the first one, Butcher and Blackbird, okay? And this was basically, just to give you a very quick summary, this was about two serial killers falling in love. There was a list of hilarious trigger warnings in the beginning of this book, and it was exactly that. It was a serial killer romance. So it was something I recommended for those of you looking for something a little bit different. If you're looking for a really interesting love story with two very unique characters and lots of murder, this is it. So this is the second book in the series. And, sometimes second books, especially when it's a trilogy, can lose their momentum and you're like, oh, I'm not really crazy about it. This book was just as amazing as the first one. So, first question, do you have to read the first one? Do you have to read Butcher and Blackbird before reading Leather and Lark? So, the answer is not really, but you should. So, if you haven't read Butcher and Blackbird first, I would highly recommend it, just because I feel like you're going to get a good feel for this author. You're going to get a feel for the way she writes, and you're going to know whether or not, her writing or this type of story is for you. You don't necessarily have to have read it first, because basically this story is about two different characters that did appear as minor characters in the first book, but you don't really have to know anything about them before starting this book. So you could technically read it without it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend reading Butcher and Blackbird first. So I talked about the trigger warnings again. The first thing I did when I got this book was I immediately flipped to the beginning to see if there was also a hilarious list of trigger warnings. And there was. So I'm just going to pick out a couple here that I'm going to read to you. Because she does, I really appreciate when books have trigger warnings and content warnings in the beginning or even at the end, because sometimes certain material can give you the ick, right? And you might want to know that ahead of time. But this one, as she says, as much as this is a dark romantic comedy and will hopefully make you laugh through the madness, it is still dark. Please read responsibly. But these trigger warnings are hilarious. Here's a couple of my favorites. Eyeballs, but not eye sockets. So you're welcome. Teeth and tooth byproducts. I might have ruined pizza and beer. Also smoothies. Still not sorry. Snow globes. Auto cannibalism? Welcome to a debate you never thought you'd have. Severed fingers. You might have new thoughts about crafting with epoxy resin. There is a lot of death. It's a book about a contract killer and a serial killer falling in love, so I feel that that's probably a given. There's other ones too, but those are my favorite. So you get a kind of a hint about this author, about Brynne Weaver's writing just from that, right? She is absolutely hilarious. She's got super dark sense of humor, but there is a sweet love story involved in here too, just because there's lots of murder and weird things with epoxy resin, which made me laugh out loud super hard. So what is this one about? This one is about Lachlan, who is actually the brother of one of the main characters in the first book, and a woman named Lark. Lark is a singer-songwriter, but she is also a little bit of a serial killer. Lachlan is a hired killer, and he messes up a job in the beginning of this book for his employer that makes him understand that he is going to be never able to climb out of this underworld. Like, he wants to be done with it. He doesn't want to do it anymore, but he feels like he's never going to get away with it. So he is actually able to make a deal with Lark who is going to get his employer to do something for her, and as a result, clear his debt. So the only catch is what Lark wants Lachlan to do for her is to marry her. And they can't stand each other. Or can they? So this is some of the tropes in this book. Obviously, there is the enemies to lovers. There is the forced proximity. There is the fake marriage. All those really fun things. Plus all this stuff about, you know, they're a contract killer and a serial killer, right? So you've got all that murdery gruesomeness too. I think that I'm not really a person that enjoys a lot of gore or gruesomeness in books, and I think that the way she does it in her books is just to a point where it's hilarious rather than icky. For example, she, in the very first scene in this book, Lark has gotten a hold of this person who is grooming young women. I believe he was like a teacher grooming his students, right? So to pay him back, she ties him to a chair and lights a bunch of fireworks to a certain appendage of his. And so it's that kind of like over-the-top brutality that is just, you can't help but chuckle at it. Or, well, maybe I can because I'm depraved. I don't know. But dark humor, it's super funny. Also a sweet love story in there too. Some spicy, steamy scenes as well. This book really does have something for everyone. Pretty much. So if this sounds like something that you would be into, I highly recommend the series, especially if you're someone who, you know, likes true crime stuff. If you like romance stories, but you're looking for something different, you're tired of the same old, there is nothing like this series out there. I can tell you that right now. It's a lot of fun, doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just hilarious and fun. So this is the second book in the series, Leather and Lark. Well, that's what we've got for you guys today. I hope that this book and this series in general just sounds really, really awesome and you want to give it a try. If so, please feel free to come check it out from Farmington Community Library. And also, thank you so very much for watching, friends. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.